She thought no one was watching. A powerful woman in a mansion with wealth and influence at her fingertips, yet in the shadows of her perfect life, she hid a cruel secret. The maid's little girl, innocent and defenseless, became her target. But that day something unexpected happened. Her husband came home early, and what he saw would shatter the image of his perfect wife forever. How could someone so admired fall so low? And what he chose to do next changed everything. For most people, life inside a millionaire's mansion looks like a dream. Lavish halls, glittering chandeliers, and a picture-perfect family that seemed untouchable. To the world, this couple embodied success. He was the self-made businessman, admired for his discipline and generosity. She was seen as the elegant wife, a woman who appeared refined and graceful in public. But behind closed doors, someone else lived in those walls too. The maid and her young daughter. They were quiet, almost invisible, working tirelessly in the background of luxury. No one questioned their presence. No one looked too closely. Yet under that roof a storm was quietly building, and soon, the truth would break through the facade, exposing the kind of darkness no wealth could ever hide. Life in the mansion seemed calm, but beneath the polished surface, cracks were forming. The wife's charm in public vanished the moment the doors closed. Her voice, once sweet, turned sharp, her eyes cold. And the one who bore the brunt of it wasn't her husband. It was the maid's young daughter. The little girl had grown up in that house, tiptoeing through rooms she never truly belonged in. She was quiet, polite, never daring to touch the fine furniture or speak unless spoken to. Yet somehow her very presence seemed to enrage the lady of the house. Small mistakes, dropping a toy, spilling water, even just laughing too loudly, became excuses for cruel punishment. The wife masked her cruelty well, timing her outbursts for when her husband was gone. During the day, when he was busy with meetings and deals, the mansion became a different place. The walls that once seemed grand now felt like a cage. The girl's only defense was silence. She learned to shrink into corners, hoping not to be noticed. But even silence couldn't protect her. Day after day, the tension grew. The maid, her mother, endured insults too, mocked for her background, her accent, her very skin. But nothing cut deeper than watching her daughter suffer. Still, fear kept her quiet. The job put food on their table, and the risk of speaking out felt too high. So she swallowed her pain, praying her employer's husband would never find out. But fate has a way of unraveling secrets. One afternoon, when the husband was supposed to be away on a business trip, plans changed. He returned home hours earlier than expected. As he stepped into the mansion, briefcase still in hand, he heard it. A muffled cry followed by the sharp echo of anger. He froze, the sound pulling him toward the living room. There, just beyond the doorway, he saw the truth with his own eyes. His wife towering over the maid's daughter, her voice laced with venom, her hand raised in rage. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The elegant woman he thought he knew had vanished. In her place stood a stranger filled with cruelty, and in that instant he realized this wasn't a single moment of anger. This was something darker, something that had been happening for far too long. The mask was off. What he chose to do next would not only decide the fate of his marriage, but also the lives of those who had been suffering in silence. The moment hung heavy in the air. The millionaire stood frozen, his polished shoes rooted to the marble floor as he watched the scene unfold. His wife's hand raised high came crashing down. Not once, but again, toward a child who had no power to fight back. The girl flinched, her small frame trembling, eyes wide with terror. For him, time slowed. The laughter of business dinners, the applause of colleagues, the admiration of friends, all those images of a perfect marriage shattered in a single breath. This wasn't just cruelty. This was hatred. It was racism, raw and unmasked, spilling out inside his own home. Rage boiled in his chest, but so did disbelief. How many times had this happened while he was gone? How long had he been blind to the suffering under his very roof? Each question cut deeper until the weight of silence was unbearable. With a voice that shook the walls, he broke it. His words weren't calm, weren't controlled, they were fire. His wife spun around, her face pale, caught not by guilt but by the shock of being exposed. Her mask, carefully crafted for years, had slipped completely. The little girl clung to the corner, breathing fast, her innocence already scarred. The maid rushed in, eyes wet with silent pleas but too afraid to move. The entire house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. And in that moment the husband realized this wasn't a private family matter anymore. This was a reckoning. A decision that would either let the cruelty continue, or tear his world apart to protect the innocent. He took a step forward, fists clenched, voice rising like thunder. What he said and did in that moment would not only destroy his wife's life of luxury, but it would change the course of every life in that mansion, forever. The silence that followed was deafening. The millionaire's voice thundered through the mansion, stripping away every ounce of power his wife once held. In that instant, her reign of cruelty ended. She was cast out. Not just from his home, but from the life of privilege she had built on lies. The world she thought she controlled crumbled in a single moment of truth. For the maid and her daughter, it wasn't just relief. It was survival. No longer forced to hide in shadows, they finally stood in the light, protected by someone who should have defended them all along. Yet the scars remained, a reminder that hate doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it lives right beside us, disguised as elegance, wealth, or respectability. But this story is bigger than one mansion, one family, or one downfall. It's about the silent battles fought every day, behind closed doors in workplaces and schools where racism festers in whispers, glances, and unchecked cruelty. Too often it goes unseen until it's too late. The husband's choice that day wasn't just about saving a child. It was about drawing a line, refusing to let hate dictate the future. His decision tore apart the illusion of perfection, but it also gave voice to the voiceless. And in the end, that voice was louder than her cruelty ever could be. So the question lingers, how many more stories like this remain hidden, waiting to be uncovered? And when the truth finally surfaces, will we have the courage to act, or will silence let injustice thrive? The decision was final. In front of everyone who served that household, the millionaire stripped his wife of the privilege she had abused. No more hiding behind wealth, no more silencing the weak. She was forced out, her reputation shattered, not by rumor but by truth finally brought into the open. For the maid and her daughter, it was more than justice, it was freedom. The child no longer had to walk on eggshells in her own home, fearing every sound, every glance, and her mother, once trapped in silence, found her dignity restored. But the damage couldn't simply vanish. Bruises fade, yet the memory of fear lingers. What happened in that mansion was just one story, but it reflected a much bigger reality. Racism doesn't always appear on the headlines. Often it festers quietly behind closed doors in places where people think no one is watching. And when it hides in plain sight, it destroys lives in silence. That's why this moment mattered, not because a millionaire acted, but because silence was broken. The truth is, for every story like this one, countless others remain untold. Children still suffer, families still endure humiliation, and injustice still wears disguises. The question isn't whether racism exists, it's whether we are willing to confront it when we see it, because in the end, it only takes one choice, one voice, to expose the darkness. The real question is, when the moment comes, will you stay silent, or will you stand against it?